Welcome to the Connection Podcast. I am Lauren Dry, also known as the Connection Catalyst. Connection and this podcast for me is personal. As a driven professional, I found myself an expert in all things work and business, but it was at home that I really needed clarity and ease. After finally finding it one marriage breakdown and one marriage reset later, and finally discovering what really works to have connection in modern relationships, using science, simplicity and soul, our signature program, Rise into Regulation, was born. That's giving so many others in modern, driven relationships back clarity and ease for good. On the podcast today, we're going to dive deep together on all things relationships, business, identity, and leadership. And clarity and ease is at the heart of it all. And we are so happy to be with you so that you can have what you need in connection, mind, body, and soul too. Hi, and welcome back to the Connection Podcast. I know you're going to love this interesting episode. If you have ever felt like your desire has quietly gone missing, even while you're maybe sneakily or not so sneakily devouring every romance novel on your shelf, then today's conversation is for you. I'm joined by Caroline Hood, a certified sex therapist and author who works at the intersection of desire, intimacy, and long-term love. We're going to get into where desire goes when women feel like maybe they've lost it, and what the romantasy explosion is really telling us about what women are hungry for in their own relationships. Welcome, Caroline. I am so curious. Why do you think that this is the episode that the audience should be listening to today?
Hi, Lauren. I'm so happy to be here. This is the episode that the audience should be listening to because it affects every relationship. Desire impacts all of us. I think whether we really know it or not, desire is such an inherent drive in all of us. And it's something that makes us tick. And it's something we either have or we're missing or we used to have or it's faded. It's living on this spectrum. And I think it's the conversation that a lot of women and couples want to have, wish they could have, are confused about, but they don't really feel like they have the space for it. So I'm hoping today's conversation is that space.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned how desire is such an important piece of the relationship puzzle, but sometimes talking about it, even with your spouse or even to your own self, feels taboo.
Oh, 100%. I think we're not educated on how to speak about it. We don't have a great acumen, and often we don't really know what we want or everything that goes into it. So then we wind up in these relationships years down the road, and we actually, it's almost you can look at it and think, oh my gosh, we talk about our finances, we talk about our health, we talk about our children. And yet there's this topic that is so important, yet maybe you've had one, two, three conversations about it, and it's all been surface level.
Yeah. Or implied, and we just guess.
Mm. Oh, yes. Lots of assumptions all over the place, or lots of hoping, hoping your partner knows what you like, hoping your partner picks up on this signal or that signal. And I'm a big fan of hope, but I also think that leaves a lot of expectations and disappointment when we're not
Yeah.
communicating
Oh,
clearly.
absolutely. Humans are
Yeah.
terrible mind readers.
Yeah, unfortunately. I wish
That's
we all were, but it's just not the case.
right. Well, I would love to hear what first drew you into this specific work around desire, intimacy, and long-term love.
It's come from a lot of places. Going way, way back, I have always been just fascinated by human behavior and our psychology and what makes us click. I went to college for psychology, have a master's in social work, and that intersection of what's happening between our ears, right? Like what makes us tick emotionally and psychologically, and also how that's impacted by our external environment and how we impact our environment. I think that has always fascinated me. And I've come to the conversation around sex and desire and intimacy, particularly in long term relationships, because of a little bit of this tension we were just talking about. This piece that, this thing that's so normal, that's so wonderful, that's so scary, it's so pervasive across people. And yet, It's so misunderstood, underarticulated, undercommunicated, and that tension, that sort of juxtaposition has confused me, and I think I have always been a person that's thought sex and intimacy is such a protective factor in a long-term relationship and can be such a creator of intimacy, and so that's just set me on this path to learn and study and research and really be in conversation with people about this work.
I'm wondering, is there anything that you believe about desire that maybe you thought or you learnt early on in your career that maybe you don't believe anymore now?
Oh, that's really interesting. I definitely think I've dispelled or believe that there's a lot of myths out there that we all receive that I look at and I go, "Oh, I don't think that actually exists." So, this myth that desire will inevitably fade or get worse or not as strong over the lifespan of a long-term relationship. I also think that spontaneity around intimacy and desire is not even that it's overrated, almost that it's not a thing at all and never was a thing. So I think those are 2 things that I think set couples up to fail when they believe in these myths because I don't actually think they're true.
That is so interesting, especially when we bring it around to things like romantasy, where spontaneity really is pretty much the backbone of most of the romance there. I would actually love to get your thoughts on that comment about how spontaneity is so often the aphrodisiac used in novels.
Yeah, sure. I think we're sometimes misinterpreting what spontaneity is. In romance novels, there is this depiction of scenes where it's your eyes meet across the way and you can't help yourselves and rip one another's clothing off and it's sort of this animalistic drive for intimacy and for sex. I think in romance novels, just like watching a fictional movie or TV show, that's interesting and potentially kind of arousing. But in real life, I often talk to folks about who think, oh, our sex life early was very spontaneous. Or when I was dating or when I was single, I had a very spontaneous sex life. And I think that's where I like to point out that that sex was never spontaneous either. It was very planned and curated when it came to scheduling dates, going out with girlfriends, going to a pub, going to a bar. Everyone else happened to be there on a Saturday night. I don't think any of us perceived it to be quote unquote scheduled. We didn't perceive it to be very curated, but it really was. And so if we fast forward and we're busy moms or busy couples with jobs and life, the constraints of our lives are different, but we can still curate those environments and those interactions just like we did even when we perceived them to be spontaneous.
Hmm. Interesting. How do you think that that relates to the statement that women often say around how their desire has gone missing after being in a relationship for so many years?
Well, I think women certainly feel that way. I think they feel that way, and my perspective is, again, looking at it from a hopeful narrative, which is that I don't think it's gone. I think it's been buried and deprioritized, certainly, but that it's not as if it's been extinguished. I think those are 2 different things. So, with intention and with awareness, we can look inward and go, "Oh, right, I actually there is actually still this part of me," or even if you can't see it, you can say, "I wish that part of me was still here and still existed and still part of my life." And I actually think that's where we can look to romantasy and the huge rise in that market to say, "Oh, okay, like, there's a longing for this. There's a appetite for it, right?" And I think there's an appetite for it, and many women aren't getting it satiated within their long-term partnership. So they're finding it elsewhere, not in a nefarious way, not through affairs. I think so again, back to hopeful, I think it does exist. It's just about how do we then name that and go, okay, great. This thing is still here. We still have the kindling. We still have the ability. So let's bring it back into our day to day life.
Yeah. I'm wondering, why can craving intimacy on a page feels so much safer than craving it in real life.
Oh. Oh, there's so much there. What you said is safety. If you are in a long-term relationship with somebody you've built your life around, maybe you have kids, you've got all this, you have a shared life, and you go to someone and you say, "Hey, I'm really interested in trying XYZ," or "Hey, I miss this part of us." That can be very fraught. The stakes are high. The stakes are high because that is your whole world that you've constructed, and you care usually about that other person's feelings. You don't want to hurt them. It's similar to how people can go to a girlfriend or even a therapist and share things they haven't shared with their partner because those people those people can judge you. I don't think they would, but they could judge you and leave your life, and your life wouldn't crumble. But if you go to your partner and feel that rejection or feel that injury, then it really can have detrimental consequences to your relationship and your life overall.
Mm.
So I think that's why it's just low stakes. It's easy, it's safe to go pivot your desire into these other realms because it's far scarier to bring it to your partner.
I hear you with that. And that really does link in with that word safety, doesn't it?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
desire isn't a switch that you forgot to flip. It's a nervous system deciding whether this is a safe place to want something.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, are you seeing or what is your take on the place of romantasy inside a safe relationship? Do you think that it helps it, or are there instances where it can hinder it?
Yes.
Yes.
Right? Yes to both of those. So here, and I'll expand. It can be great within a healthy relationship. It can be a great prompt. It can be a conversation starter. It can be an entry point for couples for someone to say, "Hey, I was reading this thing and I don't know, it was kind of interesting. I don't even actually understand why it was interesting." Or couples who read it together, or a variety of things can simply awaken or unearth some of these desires. It can also become a problem, just like other seemingly innocuous things, when they pull you away from your partner. So anything can do that. You could be great at tennis and okay, that's a wonderful thing, but then if you do it to the detriment of your family and you take so much time away and focus away, then that becomes a problem even though you're enjoying it. So if romantasy occupies your entire realm of desire, and you're limiting the intimacy that you're engaging with your partner, and you're not bringing any of that back to the couple, and it's become this kind of fully isolated, fully solo experience, then I think that can be concerning. So if it's a tool for connection, I think it's wonderful. But if it becomes a wall between the two of you that you no longer seek connection from your partner, then I think we have to look at, okay, so why is that wall being erected? And what is happening in the rest of the partnership that is preventing connection from happening?
Yeah. I'm thinking right now of a woman who's maybe listening to this and is halfway through a really cool romantasy book with all sorts
Mm.
of interesting fairies right now and
Yeah.
who's worried about being called out.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm thinking of her right now who's listening and being like, "Oh, this is some great advice." And I like what you're saying, but where's the line? How can I begin exploring safe intimacy again with my husband without losing some of the spark that maybe I've found in this romantasy world that's taken off recently?
So within the romantasy, I think one of the reasons it's so accessible is that you are the passive consumer of it. You're reading, and all the words are on the page, the scenes are set for you, and you get to simply absorb it. When you take a conversation or an experience or a desire for intimacy to your partner, you have to become an active participant. And a little bit back to where we started, we're just not good at communicating about sex and desire. And so there's a lack of acumen and can be a little fumbling. It can feel awkward. I mean, it can feel silly. No matter how long you've been together, it can feel bizarre. And so I often think, okay, you've found this thing you really like. it's awakened something in you. That's exciting. That's good. No one should feel called out. I think it's really something for women to go, "Oh my gosh, okay, yes, it's still here. Okay, but now I have no idea what to do, how to bring it to my partner." And I'm a big fan of building up the courage and the vulnerability and finding time outside of bedroom, outside of sex at some other time that's less fraught, and going to your partner and saying, "I've been reading this book. I really like it. I was surprised I liked it. I'm not into fairies. I don't know what's going on. I just really enjoy it. It's really riveting. And I don't even know really how to talk about it with you. And I feel awkward and I feel silly, but I want to try. I want to just sort of talk with you about it. And I want to name that I feel a little ridiculous. And so I think I like that approach of like, I'm going to name that I feel like a teenager that is unsteady in myself and just put that out there and take some air out of the balloon in the conversation. And just, it doesn't have to go straight to, and I want to try this thing. It's just, I found this book and I think it's kind of fun. I don't know. What do you think? And that can just tiptoe you into these conversations and hopefully you have a good experience. So then the next conversation feels a little easier and so on and so forth. So that nature of it, we can take that sense of fraught down.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really powerful and important around the word fumbling that
Mm,
you used, because often with romantasy, it can create this idealized version of intimacy, whether it's physical or emotional intimacy. And sometimes that fumbling gets missed out of the middle.
yes, it's written to be beautiful and seamless, right? And seemingly effortless. And you're exactly right. I think we need to remind ourselves that we fumble, that sex is it's messy, it's silly, it's almost ridiculous. It's play. It's adult play. And without going into details, I mean, you can think, "Oh my gosh, how ridiculous. We're in these positions and what if, it just is it's silly and bring back that levity." But you're right. The scenes in the books and in the movies, oh gosh, they're beautiful. And we have to click on and remind ourselves that that is fiction and reality is far clunkier, and that doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's real.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd say to someone who perhaps is maybe feeling like, oh, I understand what you're saying. And I
Mhm.
think that what you're mentioning about fumbling has a point. I'd like more fumbling back in my relationship, but the risk feels a bit too high. It's really nice living in this fantasy world where there's fairies and all sorts of perfect scenarios. And I do want that physical intimacy with my partner, and I want to have that play, and I want to have that fumbling back. But it seems like the gap has gotten too big. And
Mhm.
for a lot of women, they find that they're choosing between performance and intimacy or safety and nothing. What would you say to someone who's beginning to explore safety and fumbling again?
Yeah, I think that's very real. So I would say, as we've talked about, let's bring back that playful spirit. But before we jump straight to, okay, this is how we're going to go back to sex in our relationship or more frequent sex or more pleasurable sex, let's pull it back and not even actually talk about sex. Many couples are forgetting about that playful sexual energy that can exist outside of sexual encounters. Flirting, for lack of a better word, that can lower the stakes. So I'm always looking at people who feel like, oh gosh, the gap has gotten so wide, I don't even know where to begin. So don't jump to the end. We don't have to get all the way there. Let's lower the stakes. Let's take baby steps. And so sometimes couples are at this place where they're excellent coworkers, they're excellent co-parents, they manage a home, etc., but they're no longer lovers. And that's okay. We can bring that back. And so don't jump straight to the sex. Let's start by reminding both ourselves and our partner, okay, I'm a sexual being. I have sexual energy in me. You're a sexual being. And I want to ensure that we have relationship as as lovers alongside co-parents and coworkers and roommates that we want to maintain this identity as part of our relationship. And that can be really simple. It can be date nights and vacations and all of that. That's fine. Those are wonderful. But it can be those simple a kiss that's 2 seconds instead of 1. It's a grab on the thigh. It's a handhold. It's engaging on a regular basis this sexual frequency, sexual energy, sexual touch, intimate touch that isn't driving to a sexual encounter, that it isn't an ask for sex. It's just awakening, oh, right, this is a dynamic that you and your partner have across the day, across your relationship, not just in those discrete buckets when you're actually having sex. I think that's a huge thing that people can do that's free. It doesn't take more time. It's easy to implement.
I really love that reference to how playful intimacy and experimentation with that physical intimate connection is so important as a first step because so many of the women and the couples that I work with, there's a huge aha moment that happens when they realize, when was the last time we played? When was the last time we actively chose to make a mistake? Whether it's through a sports game, a card
Mhm.
game, or together in an activity with the family. Playful intimacy, I think we can all logically know is important for a relationship. I think you've really put the finger on there of something really important, that experimenting and bringing that play back is an essential piece to the puzzle.
Absolutely. Play is really interesting. I think there's wonderful research that has affirmed the importance of play in children. It's affirmed how that's how our executive functioning grows, our prefrontal cortex is developed as children. That's where risk taking happens, and you test out rules and you play fantasy and role play. And most parents really support play in their children and recognize the critical nature of it. And at some point, the royal we, have decided that play is no longer important and even sometimes wrong or immoral or invalid even. And so as adults, we put that to the side for more serious endeavors. And I really want to support couples and argue that play is really essential across a lifespan. And sex and intimacy, I think, is really one of the primary ways in which adults play, where we take those risks, as you said, where we endeavor into fantasies, where we can embody different roles, we can relax, we can shift mental and physical states. And if we're not having that type of play with our partner, we're often not playing in other facets of our life. I've got 3 kids, a job, all of that. I'm not out playing every day. That's not happening. And so without that type of playfulness, I don't think adults are really playing, and it can be a real harm on your own self, your own happiness and joy, as well as that happiness and joy that you have with your partner.
I think that that's huge. Last night, I took the kids out for dinner while my husband was working late. And even just sitting there and playing with the kids and bringing that energy into the family, it takes some conscious work sometimes because life is so greedy. There's always another notification on the phone. There's always another load of washing. There's always a work deadline coming up. Life is so greedy. And sometimes it takes that really conscious attention to bring play back into not only the family, but the relationship. Something I've started doing is keeping a pack of Uno cards in my bag and
Hmm.
a little pocket battleship game and making sure that we choose to use that. But sometimes it really takes that conscious attention. Okay, maybe I'm distracted because I am waiting for a notification, so I should turn my phone off instead of just, you know, allowing that to be background noise and being surprised that I can't drop into that playful state and that playful presence and being able to remember that I have a body at all.
Exactly, and I think you hit on something really interesting that I think some people, get confused about, which is you just talked about, "Oh, you have to actually be intentional around play," and you brought the Uno cards. I think there can be this idea that sex or chemistry or play needs to be wholly organic and sort of fully arise from the ether. And if you have to put intention toward it, then it's not as good or pure or worthy. And so that I think your example is really good. The intention is there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's really important to carve out those spaces. And if couples aren't carving out those spaces for play, then it's no wonder that when it comes time when you're saying, "Okay, it's our time to be intimate." If you haven't scattered in playful jokes, playful chats, playful foreplay, playful flirting throughout the week, and you arrive at time for sex, that switching of that gear is just it's far too hard to shift if you haven't had any of that sprinkling of playfulness throughout. And so I think, yeah, that little playfulness will then allow you to pivot because you're right, the notifications are coming. Adulthood is greedy. I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. And so the the ability to pivot into this mental and physical space for sex, if you haven't even sprinkled in a teeny little bit of that throughout, let's say, a week, and you arrive on a Saturday night, I think it just really sets up couples to be disappointed because they haven't, warmed up their muscles at all, right? They haven't built up anything, any reserve to be able to pivot.
An entire genre of literature doesn't blow up by accident. So when millions of women reach for the same story, it's definitely not just a trend, it's a symptom of something underneath. What do you think that the romantasy explosion is telling us about what women really are actually hungry for?
Women are hungry to invite that desire back into their lives in some fashion. Women, we are engineered to be selfless. We are engineered to think of others. If you are a mother, there's a whole extra suite of what you are engineered to be. And really, in some ways, we are sort of told that once we become a mother or of a certain age or perimenopausal or menopausal, that we're no longer sexual beings. And so I think we can look at romantasy and say, oh, it is very clear that actually women are still sexual beings. I don't think it indicates that women want to actually be intimate with fairies. It indicates that, right? It indicates that we are sexual beings throughout a lifespan. And that's very exciting. And for many women, I can think of many conversations I've had with girlfriends who been married for decades and just felt like, well, yeah, this is just the way it is. The sex we have is like an oil change, and that's all. And then they start reading these things and they're surprising themselves by how much they enjoy it. And they're trying to figure out what that means. And so, as you said, it's not just a trend, it's showing all of us that we have sexual agency and sexual appetites throughout a lifespan. And that's really exciting. And I think that benefits all of us to really go exploring what that looks like.
What I love most about what you shared there is how freeing it is for so many women to acknowledge that the rise of the romantasy culture is actually an indicator that that desire is still alive in them and that that can be something that is harnessed and brought into their relationship. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean using a fairy.
Yeah, I mean, I think desire is a health marker. We think about those health markers, those vital signs of your heart rate and your pulse. And sometimes we hear people say the fifth vital sign is your menstrual cycle. If you're a woman who continues to menstruate, I kind of think of desire as a sixth health marker. It is something, and so it's something to cultivate and something to look at and go, okay, am I well? Do I have desire? If I don't, if I can't find it, let's figure out where it is. It's not dead. It's just a little buried under stress and
Mm.
cognitive load and parenting and all of the things. And now we have really looking at romantasy as simply this tool, this sort of bridge, this access point from which we've been able to say, oh, okay, great, it's still there. So now I get to cultivate it, and now I get to try to understand it and bring it back into my partnership with my partner, who I'm hoping, I encourage couples to think of these conversations not as a, how come we never do this anymore? That doesn't go anywhere good. It's a place of, I miss this part of me. I miss this part of us. I want to want again. I want to be wanted. And I'm interested in seeing if we can start to build back that bridge. And
Mm,
that conversation can be an invitation and not an accusation, and I think that it's really important to approach it from that perspective.
it's interesting. Often, the more competent a woman is everywhere else, the harder surrender or even invitation can
Mm.
feel anywhere at all. So, for the woman who finds it hard to put the mask down and be vulnerable and surrender anywhere outside fantasy, what would you say is the reason that competence can work against them in this vital desire area of their life?
I think that's a great question. I think there's a few things happening there, which is that this isn't something that, if you are in a partnership, this isn't something that you solely control. You don't own it. You are within an ecosystem of a partnership. There's you, there's your partner, and the third entity is the relationship. And so, yes, you feed into it and you influence it, but you obviously have this other person, and then you form this thing. And I think that that can be scary because women can't control it fully. I think the other thing that can trip up women is that, back to the sort of archetypes that we take on as successful, competent, driven women, desire is often not something that we have validated. It's not something that we have even given ourselves permission to decide for ourselves that it is valid and worthy of my time, energy, and efforts. So before we can even jump to, "Oh, why don't you try this?" or "Why don't you try that?" I think women do need to go back and decide, "Is this actually have I decided that this is a worthy endeavor? Or have I always determined that this made me perhaps selfish, or this made me a distraction from my achievement-oriented focus?" And so pulling back those layers and hopefully getting to a place where you can say, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna validate that this is an inherent right that I have to be a sexual agent. And so if it is a right, I get to now care about it. I get to cultivate it and I get to nurture it. And then I can take it into my relationship and start back to that fumbling. And even though you're used to being so competent and confident, bracing yourself and naming it with your partner and saying, thinking of it as like, this is a new skill that nobody ever taught me, nobody ever cultivated to no fault of my own. So here we go. We're going to start. And whether that's at 30 or 60 or 70, you can always start, but there is a skill around it. So you might feel incompetent at first, and
Yeah.
there has to be some grace given for that learning curve.
For the women listening who maybe feel like they've lost this natural spark and desire for good, but is starting to open up a little bit to the possibility of play and surrender and fumbling again, what would you say to them?
I would say, great. First of all, okay, so you thought this piece was gone, and now you're thinking, oh, okay, maybe there's just this teeny twinge. I think I think that's great. That's a crack in the door, right? It's a little bit of an opening in the window to go exploring. But that woman has to decide, back to what we were just saying, she has to decide that she wants to cultivate it. And so it's desire, one of those myths that desire is just, it will just be organic and all of the time. Desire requires cultivation and I think an intention, right? And the desire and the intimacy with a partner in a long-term relationship requires intentionality, like we talked about with play and nurturing. So if she sees that little opening, then I think there's the point for her to decide, and potentially with her partner to decide, okay, is this something we care about? Is this something I care about? And if the answer is no, that's fine. But I would say, at least arrive at that no from an aware place that you've actively made the decision that it doesn't matter. But if you think about it and you reflect upon it and potentially talk about it and go, oh, actually, gosh, maybe this would be something we would like to just nurture a bit. Then you start with those baby steps, those conversations, those little approaches that can start to feed and be a catalyst for that opportunity for greater intimacy.
I love that. That's so powerful. Taking back that autonomy and letting go of control in the interests of choice.
Yes. Yes. It's so important. I think women need to feel like they're in control of their own sexual agency. I think that's hugely important. And couples feeling like they're able to have an active, intimate sex life across a long-term relationship. I mean, what an opportunity. So I think so many couples think, okay, that'll be fun and then we'll have kids and it's all over. And so nobody actually seeks to recultivate it because they've bought into that idea that it will just inevitably be done. So if you think it's destiny that you'll lack desire in long-term love, then you don't take any action to change it. But if you believe, "Oh, no, I think it's possible," then you're able to say, "Okay, so then what actions do I need to take to ensure I support it?"
Absolutely. That's so powerful. Okay, Caroline, before we start to wrap, I want
Yeah.
to put you in the hot seat. 5 questions.
Okay.
First answer that comes to mind, no overthinking. Okay?
Okay.
Are
I'll
you
do my
ready?
best. Yes.
Okay, first question. One word for desire before you understood it, and one word for it now.
Before I understood it, sex.
Yep.
How I understand it now, eros, eroticism.
Wow, that's powerful. Second question. The most surprising thing that romance novels actually get right about women's desire.
That it's big and expansive and creative.
Beautiful. Third question. A sentence that you wish every long term couple heard.
That it is very possible to have a rich, pleasurable, fulfilling sex life throughout the duration of your relationship.
The moment you personally knew that your own relationship to the word desire had changed.
After I had my first child.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Talk me through that one.
After I became a mother, so I have 3 children. After I became a mother, it became more clear to me that the component that I my body was no longer mine. I mean, for parents who've birthed children, you know, you're this vessel and this vehicle for these other human beings in such an animalistic way, primal way. And in the throes of early motherhood where hormones are everywhere and no sleep and all of it, I felt missing. I felt missing from myself. And in that moment, within the first month or so, I really had an opportunity to reflect and recognized how important desire and intimacy was to my own sense of who I was, and that I was gonna be an amazing mother, but I wasn't gonna relinquish who I was, and this was the piece of me that I could maintain and therefore could help me feel like I could still maintain a sense of my own independence even when every second of the day outside of it was fully in service of this other creature, it was still mine. And I think it was such a fundamental shift for me that really enabled me to stay grounded in a sense and not lose myself in motherhood, which is just the pull is so strong.
That's amazing. So empowering. Last question. Finish this sentence. Desire finally comes back when.
When you invite it in.
Beautiful. I love that. I think that
Mm,
that's a really beautiful bow to
mm.
tie this episode up with. And on that note, I would love to ask you, Caroline, where can the audience find you after this chat if they would like to continue the conversation, learn a little bit more about you and your work?
All of my handles are the same, so hopefully it'll be easy for people to connect. Desire in Real Life is my handle website there at Desire in Real Life on Instagram. But really around Substack is where I spend a lot of my time. So I publish a lot of essays and a lot of articles that marries some science with some real life experiences, some real stories to hopefully just spur conversation, spur curiosity, bring people into connection. And so at Desire in Real Life is where you can find me. And I'm always open to chat with folks who want to reach out. It's never a burden.
Thank you so much for being with us, Caroline. I know that this is an episode that's going to get saved, that's going to get shared, that's going to allow women to feel so seen and heard and maybe enlighten some men along the journey too. Thank you so much to the audience for listening along. I'd love to hear what your biggest aha moment was and your biggest takeaway from this episode. And if this has brought up something from you, something that has sparked, something that made you feel alive or made you feel like you want to go a little bit deeper and see what the possibilities are in your relationship, in your marriage, and so that you can reset your own hidden patterns too. Come and join us over on Instagram at Lauren_dry. I would love to chat with you, maybe send you some extra resources. And I want to thank you for being brave and connected and curious enough to see what's next. Thanks for joining us at the Connection Podcast, and I'll see you soon. Big love.